Hey guys, this is Suyun Kang from Asian Boss Next. China's recent movements to claim Korean cultures, such as kimchi, hanbok, and even famous Korean celebrities, has been an issue in Korea. In fact, China has been expanding soft power through media, claiming neighboring countries' cultural heritage as theirs for years. So our Asian Boss Next reporters hit the streets of Incheon to find out how people think about this issue. Let's see what people have to say.
Hello, my name is Soyoung Kim, and I'm one of the members of Asian Bots Next. I'm going to ask you about some questions regarding Chinese culture theft. So, first of all, what comes into your mind when you think of Korea or Korean culture?
지금 현재 유명한 거는 케이팝이 대표적으로 유명하다고 생각하거든요.
For Korean culture, I would say what most foreigners think of first is the Korean dramas and K-pop recently, and then for Americans, the Korean War obviously comes into mind, and for kimchi because that's a well-known Korean dish, or that's a perception that most foreigners have.
일단 음식 문화에서는 뭐 김치를 얘기할 수 있고 일본 문화에서는 한복 얘기할 수 있을 거예요.
What comes to my mind is like mainly is a lot different from the United States. Like there's a lot more respect for elders. There's like even the differences between bowing and handshaking. Handshaking is usually okay in the United States, but you don't see that in Korea. I think of honestly really good food.
Recently, some group of Chinese insisted that particular Korean cultures such as kimchi, hanbok, and even Korean celebrities are from China and Korea is copying their culture. This recently became a big issue in Korea. Were you aware of this issue?
So I was aware of some of the issues, and I know because I go to school with with a lot of Korean students, and they mention sometimes about the Chinese claiming kimchi. You know, hanbok is actually Chinese traditional dress. So I am aware, and especially the whole BTS issue that was evolving end of last year. So I'm somewhat aware.
I was not aware. No.
최근 중국이 소셜미디어, 드라마 등의 여러 매체를 통해 아까 말씀하신 것과 같이 김치, 한복과 같은 한국의 고유 문화를 본인들의 것이라고 주장하는 일들이 있었는데요. 이 상황에 대해서 한국에선 다양한 반응과 해석이 있어요. 이러한 중국의 행동에 대해서 혹시 어떻게 생각하시나요?
일단 중국에서 좀 억지 주장하는 것 같고요. 고유의 문화를 좀 존중해줄 필요가 있을 거라고 생각합니다.
솔직히 잘못됐다고 생각하거든요. 저도 뭐 스포츠나 이런 것도 봤을 때도 손흥민 선수가 뭐 최근에 기사를 봤을 때 손흥민 선수가 중국인이라는 그쪽에 뭐 그렇게 얘기를 들었었어요. 근데 들었을 때도 좀 어처구니 하죠. 그것도 그렇고 뭐 예전에도 뭐 아이돌 관련해서도 중국에서도 저희 아이돌이 이렇게 본토가 그냥 그게 대표적인 건데 이제 중국에서 그거를 이제 카피해가지고 그거를 좀 자기네 거라고 좀 우기는 거 보면은 잘못했다고 생각합니다.
한국의 고유 문화 전통을 뺏어가는 거는 저는 말이 안 된다는 행동으로 좀 생각이 드는.
아시다시피 중국 쪽에서 김치나 한복 같은 우리의 고유 문화를 자신들의 것으로 주장하는 일도 있었고, 손흥민이나 김연아 같이 유명한 스포츠 선수들이나 이영애와 같은 셀러브리티들도 자신의 중국 사람이라고 주장하는 일들이 있었어요. 중국의 이런 행동을 혹시 문화 도둑이라고 생각하시나요?
네, 그렇게 좀 생각합니다.
혹시 그렇게 생각하신다면 그 이유를 여쭤볼게요.
애초에 이제 저희도 애초에 그 처음부터 그거에 대한 근거도 있고 주장하는 게 또 있는데 걔네는 아무 이유도 없이 그냥 그거를 그냥 아무 이유 없이 그냥 우기는 식으로 주장을 하다 보니까 걔네는 이게 내세울 게 없잖아요. 그냥 우기는 것만 강하다 보니까 전 그거에 대해서 좀 잘못됐다고 생각합니다.
그냥 갑자기 저희 집에 와서 물건 가져가면 다를 게 없잖아. 이거는 원래 저희 건데 그걸 가져가니까.
일단은 자기네 거가 아닌 거를 계속 자기네가 만들었다라고 말하고 맨날 누가 봐도 우리나라 건데 지들 거라고 그냥 우기니까.
So, do you think this is culture theft?
I think it is, and I think China can do it because they just have a lot more influence and power than Korea does. They're a much larger country and with a lot more soft power influence over other countries than Korea has.
It's hard to say. You know, preference is personal, but in my opinion, I don't now think this culture shift. For example, the kimchi, in my opinion, I think that's the symbol of Korea. But some Chinese festival like Dragon Boat Festival, that Korea applied for Korean culture. I don't think so. That must be come from China. So I think we need to discuss this topic from both sides, from the positive and negative one.
As we all know, we are currently living in a highly globalized world. Do you think these issues are natural as the outcome of globalization and cultural exchange? Or do you think it is clearly a distortion of history and cultural theft?
I think it's more so just culture theft because I think China's doing it because they can do it, because they have the power to do it and they have the influence to do it. I think globalization can be a factor into it because countries are more connected than ever before. But so maybe some confusion is possible there with what actually is and isn't, what culture belongs to a country and what doesn't. But I think in this case, it is more of an example of China just wanting to expand their influence and power.
문화를 교류하기 위해서는 각 정부 간에 이제 의견을 주고받고 서로 존중을 해주면서 각자의 문화를 존중을 해주면서 주고받는 것인데 이제 무조건 본인의 것이라고 주장하는 면에서는 세계화에 좀 도움이 되는 점은 아닌 것 같아요.
저는 일단은 그런 관점은 반대로 생각하는데 왜냐면 김치라던가 중국이 말하는 한복 이런 거는 이미 옛날 진짜 오래전부터 우리나라 고유 문화였기 때문에 그게 세계화로 인해서 그게 중국과 합쳐진다거나 그런 식의 말은 말이 안 된다고 생각해요.
I think they're both correct because living in a globalized society, it's bound to happen that the cross mingling of cultures is going to happen. But also, and again, I think China is a special case because I don't want to make it sound like I'm complicitly biased, but historically the Han Chinese, they've done a really good job of assimilating other cultures and making it Chinese. So, and I can see how, because if you look at the Belt Road Initiative, I mean, China basically owns Jeju right now. I mean, they have major financial investments on the island. So I can see how Koreans are worried about cultural appropriation by the Chinese because the Koreans remember that, how hard it was to have their country independent again.
I think it's definitely a natural result of the globalization. For the most country before the globalization, they do not know much about foreign culture. For China, as for me, before I came to Korea, I just know a little about Korea. But with the globalization, I have the opportunity to Korea for trip or shopping or study. So I have the chance to learn more about Korea. So with the development of globalization, maybe the way of people to see the world, to see foreign country will change. So I think it's nature.
So you said that this issue is the history distortion and culture theft. Could you provide more details?
So for the history aspect, so there is a big controversy about one of the, I think it's the Goguryeo dynasty, the one up by the North Korean border with China, and the Chinese are saying that's actually Chinese history, not Korean. So by having these, I guess, rewrites or alternate history, they basically are trying to claim more of basically land and peoples. And if you look at BTS, BTS was just making, I think they were accepting an award from an American NGO, and then BTS, they were mentioning Koreans and Americans have the shared pain and trauma of the Korean War, and then all the Chinese netizens that got online well, what about the Chinese? And South Koreans are well, you kind of invaded us. So it's that rewrite of history that I think is kind of dangerous because it kind of skews facts, and that's kind of, facts are important.
Okay, for the history of globalization, it's quite short as the development of human beings. So it's just the start for globalization, like the recognized curve. When we first know something, we might reject the new things, but as development of our recognized, we will be more acceptable to new things. As for me, when I came to Korea, I learned about Korea culture, food, and some people. Now I'm trying to love this country now.
Many Koreans got furious regarding this issue. Even the media seriously dealt with this issue too. Do you think Koreans are overreacting, or do their reactions seem natural or understandable?
I think Korean reactions to this is understandable because Korean has always been sandwiched between either Japan or China. So the Koreans, they feel very strongly of what their culture is because they've been invaded before and occupied. So especially now, they really want to assert what is Korean culture and keep what is theirs.
No, I think it's a natural reaction because every country and every will have their own culture. Every nation will want to keep their own culture. They want to identify with it. Same goes for Korea, China, the United States. It goes for everywhere. I think it's justified.
It's definitely a nature reaction. First of all, for some media company, they want to get more attention from people, so they will describe the issue more seriously than the fact. Apart from that, I think both China and Korea are confusing culture. So there are not enough cultural diversity in both countries. I think both China and Korea need to learn how to deal with foreigner countries in a proper way.
Has your country ever experienced culture theft?
Oh, I have never heard about it.
I don't think I don't think it's like to the degree of what China is doing. I think mainly the United States is the one that is stealing, to be honest, because there's so many immigrants coming to the United States. The United States is basically a culture of the United States culture is basically a whole bunch of cultures mixed together with Hispanic culture and European culture and African culture just coming together to make one big culture. Like that is the United States.
So America, I think, being such a country made up with all kinds of cultures. I mean, what is American culture? I mean, I don't know, because we have Korean Americans that bring over Korean culture, we have Japanese that bring over Japanese culture. So I would say for American culture, we kind of assimilate other people's cultures. So I don't really think the Americans have ever experienced cultural theft.
이러한 한국, 즉 타국의 문화를 중국에 봉북의 것이라며 주장하는 이슈에 대한 해결 방안을 모색한다면 어떤 방식이 있을 수 있을까요? 개인적인 차원, 문화적인 차원으로도 생각해 볼 수 있을 것 같습니다.
일단 개인적으로는 일단 저희가 좀 더 한복을 일단 평소에 좀 자주 안 입기도 하는데 한복 문화를 좀 더 활성화시킬 필요도 있을 것 같고요. 김치도 좀 이제 세계화시켜서 여러 나라에 전파하는 그런 문화 활동을 가져갔으면 좋겠습니다.
지금 아무래도 뭐 유튜브나 SNS가 많이 활발하다 보니까 이거를 좀 유튜브를 하시는 분들이나 SNS를 많이 이용하시는 분들이 좀 어느 정도 좀 많이 널리 퍼뜨릴 수 있게 좀 운동을 했었으면 좋겠습니다.
우리나라의 유명한 사람, 외국에서 우리나라의 유명한 사람들이 일단 그게 우리나라 문화라고 말을 하면 자연스럽게 그게 우리나라 문화라고 외국인들도 받아들일 것 같아서 아까 말했던 K-pop 스타들이라던가 스포츠 스타들이 우리나라 정부와 함께 그런 프로젝트를 하거나 하면 효과가 있을 것 같아요.
We asked people in the streets, including Koreans and foreigners, what they think about the recent soft power expansion movements of China, and listened to different opinions from many people's perspectives. Some replied that this is a natural phenomenon, while others disagreed. What do you think about this issue? Let us know in the comments below. If you like our video, like and subscribe. And as always, stay curious.